Hey guys, in today's video we're going over the basics of MIDI programming and understanding the different MIDI commands. MIDI is a very complex subject, but I'm going to try to simplify it down as much as possible. I can't be certain exactly what you are looking to do for understanding MIDI and what made you click this video. If you're looking for like a history of it or what MIDI is and the ones and zeros and all that stuff, I don't think I'm the guy who's qualified to talk about that, so that's not what this video is going to be about. Instead, this video is going to be about how to use MIDI to send information to anything that reads MIDI that can change parameters of that device. Sounds complicated, but watch, like when I push this button on my iPad, this changed to a different patch. Same when I touch this one. See how it changed? And again, it changed. Now if I touch this, this light will light up. Next one. Next one, so on and so forth. Or this one, I can get to display a goofy message on my iPad. That is what we're going to be going over in this video. We're going to be understanding MIDI channels, MIDI program changes, MIDI controller changes, and I'm going to give you a few other tips of, sending MIDI notes, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, but I'll cover that and a few other bonus tips. If that's what you're looking for, that's what we're going to discuss in this video. And if that's not what you're looking for, sorry, best of luck. I will post links in the description down below of other MIDI videos explaining other topics of MIDI, so hopefully you can find what you're looking for. So I'll post time codes on the screen now in case if you want to skip around. I'm going to assume that you're brand new to MIDI programming and you're going to start from scratch. So that way, if it's something that you already know, you can go ahead and skip around the video to find the part that you're interested in learning. So there are many, many, many ways to connect MIDI devices. This is the setup that I've decided to go with: an iPad, an HX Stomp, which is a amp modeler and effects processor for guitar players, and then this AIRTURN MIDI pedal. All the ideas here will likely apply to whatever you're trying to program. So if you're trying to send a MIDI controller to send a message to your computer or to Ableton or something like that, or vice versa, you want your computer to send information to your keyboard or a sequencer or something like that. The general ideas are all the same. This is just what I decided to do as far as what would be best for this demo and what would be the best to have this make sense. So before we get started, I post stuff about music tech, programming MIDI, in-ears, wireless, all sorts of stuff all the time. If you're interested in checking out more videos like this in the future, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so how do you connect MIDI devices? We've established that MIDI is used to send information from one device or computer or tablet to another device in order to change some of the settings or parameters in that device. So how do you make these connections? So first of all, one of the most common ways, and kind of an older way, but still pretty common, is this type of cable. It's called MIDI cable. It's called a 5-pin MIDI cable. And on your devices that accept 5-pin MIDI, you either have MIDI in, MIDI out, or MIDI through. MIDI out and MIDI through sometimes share the same connector. So let's say I want to send MIDI from my HX Stomp to a keyboard. I would plug the MIDI cable into the MIDI out port of the HX Stomp into the MIDI in port of the keyboard. I would do it vice versa if I wanted to send info from the keyboard to the HX Stomp. I would plug the cable into the MIDI out of the keyboard into the MIDI in of the HX Stomp. Now the through is if I wanted to daisy chain. So say in that situation where I sent MIDI from my keyboard to my HX Stomp, and then I wanted to keep sending that signal and daisy chain it and send it to my drum sampler, for example, I would go MIDI out of the keyboard to the MIDI in of the HX Stomp, and then the MIDI out / through out of the HX Stomp into the drum sampler. So that would daisy chain them together, which is actually how I do it live. So the second way to do this is by MIDI over USB, which is becoming more and more popular. The HX Stomp accepts USB-B type of cable, and then I would have to get a USB-B to USB-A cable in order to plug my HX Stomp into, say, a computer or something like that. So that looks like this. So this is the USB-B, and this is USB-A. This would plug in to my HX Stomp, and then this side would plug into my computer. Or in this case, it would plug into the iPad, which you can do. They have adapters to convert Lightning pin to USB. And then the third most common way to connect MIDI devices is MIDI over Bluetooth. So that's the way that this device actually connects. Now, if you look, see this one right here, the BT200S-6, that is this pedal right here. This is connected by Bluetooth. Just like any other Bluetooth device, you turn this on, you find it in here in your computer or your tablet. So this device has Bluetooth enabled, and this device has Bluetooth enabled. The HX Stomp does not have Bluetooth enabled. So I am trying out this thing called the WIDI Master, which I'm going to do a video on here in the future. So don't forget to subscribe to see that one when that comes out. But this converts your standard MIDI connections, the 5-pin MIDI connections, into Bluetooth MIDI, which is really cool. So that's the main way that I'm going to be controlling these devices. So that's how you make the connections with MIDI. Okay, so the first step to understanding MIDI is MIDI channels. MIDI can transmit information on 16 different channels, channels 1 through 16. So why would you need to do that? So if you have multiple MIDI devices reading MIDI signals, you don't want the messages to get confused with each other. So, for example, on my HX Stomp, I have that set to read only on MIDI channel 4. So any information that I send from my iPad, which is what I'm using to demo this, if I send any information on MIDI channel 3, 2, 1, 5, anything else besides 4, my HX Stomp is not going to listen to that information. So this is useful for, because I'm a live looper, and I actually have my guitar effects reading on channel 4, my vocal processor reading on channel 2, my iPhone, which runs my keyboard samples, is reading on channel 11, my drum pad is reading on channel 10, and so on and so forth. So none of the messages that I send will get them mixed up. So make sure that if you're controlling multiple MIDI devices, you set them to a different channel so that there's not any mix-up. So MIDI channels are basically, we're going to funnel our way down. At the very top, we have MIDI channels. And within those MIDI channels, we have something called program changes. And then going into finer detail, we have controller changes. So just think of it kind of as a funnel. So in this funnel, I'm putting my HX Stomp is on MIDI channel 4. That's at the top of the funnel. Everything that is sent on MIDI channel 4 will control the HX Stomp. We have another funnel that has MIDI channel 10, and that controls my SPDSX drum sampler. But for right now, we're just focusing on the HX Stomp. The channel is at the top of the funnel, and that controls the HX Stomp. And only MIDI messages sent on channel 4 will continue down the funnel. Okay, so now that we understand MIDI channels, we're going to understand the difference between program changes and controller changes. So the HX Stomp is actually a great device to demo this on. So again, at the top of our funnel, we have MIDI channels, which control just one device. We've established that the HX Stomp is only going to read on channel 4. Now, program changes, do you see how I have all these different presets in here? Different amp modelers, different effects and stuff like that. It goes from 0 all the way up to 125. That's the highest one that we have. So we have the presets, and then within that, I have different arrangements. So I have a delay on this one, a reverb on this one, an amp in preset 0. If I go over to preset 1, I have a slightly different configuration. Preset 2, slightly different configuration. Preset 3, slightly different configuration. So the program change you can think of as like the preset right here, which is preset 3 in this case. So we have channel 4 is the HX Stomp. Within the HX Stomp, which is on channel 4, we have program changes, which define the presets in here. Now, within each preset, we have different controls in here. I have a amp in here. I have a plate reverb on here. I have a tape delay on here. I have a compressor on here, so on and so forth. So within this preset, I have different buttons and different parameters that I can change. I have different control over all the parameters within this preset right here. So say on my plate reverb, I want more decay, less decay. I want to change that plate reverb to a chamber reverb or something like that. So the control change or controller changes, those are used to control the parameters and parts within that preset. In my case, for the HX Stomp, the amps, the effects, the reverbs, and stuff like that. So again, we have our MIDI channel, which is encompassed by MIDI channel 4, which controls everything in the HX Stomp. Going deeper into the funnel, we have program changes, which are going to change the preset. And then deeper into those presets, we have all the different parameters that we can control in here. The effects, what type of effects, how much of those effects, what button do I push, stuff like that. So we have MIDI channel, program change, control change. Makes sense? So part of the reason why I'm using the iPad is because I'm using an app called OnSong, which is such a cool app, but it has a thing where you can draw, where you can make sticky notes, and you can assign those sticky notes to do whatever you want when you press them. So I've already set this up ahead of time. So when I have this one set to send program change 3 as a message on only channel 4, send program change 3, program change 10, and program change 126. Watch what happens to the preset on the HX Stomp when I press these buttons. Changed, it changed, and it changed. Now, you might be going, wait, this says preset 126. Why did that load preset 125? So here's the other thing, is so once you get to program changes and control changes, MIDI can send a value of between 0 and 127. So again, our MIDI channels, we have 1 through 16. For program changes and control changes, we can send a MIDI value of 0 to 127. Where this gets confusing is, I'm actually going to walk you through how I programmed this. I'm just going to build a new one. So I'm going to tap this, and it says no actions assigned. I tap that, and then I say, what action do I want to send? And this is the thing that's crazy about OnSong, is you can send all these different messages, so much stuff. It's used for backing tracks and lyrics and chord charts and stuff like that, but it has MIDI stuff. So I'm going to do MIDI event send, and I'm going to add a new MIDI event. And again, every MIDI device is going to be a little bit different, but this one seems to make the most sense. So this is what MIDI event is going to send when I tap on the sticky note. So what type of message do I want to send? Do I want to send a control change, a program change, and then all these other ones, which again, MIDI is very complicated. We're mostly just focusing on these like top 3. I'm going to send a program change. What channel am I sending it on? 4. Because my HX Stomp only reads on channel 4. Now this is where it gets confusing. What program change do I want to send? It does not give me program change 0, which is what this starts on. It gives me 1 through 128, but my HX Stomp reads on 0 to 127. So this is where it gets a little bit confusing. So these numbers are off by 1. This one starts on 0, this one starts on 1. So if I send program change 6, and what's nice is that it has this test command button right here so I can test it, it loads program change 5. So I have to subtract 1. And again, this might be getting a little bit complicated. I'm just trying to show you how complicated MIDI can work. So program change 1 actually goes to program change 0 in here. Does that make sense? So when I send program change 126, it loads program 125, right? Because of the way that it works from 0 to 127, whereas in OnSong, it sends 1 through 128. Just a little bit confusing. So hitting this one, which is programmed to send program change 10, it loads, what number is it going to load? 9. And this one, program change 3, is going to load preset 2 in here. Makes sense? So that's how you can control your program changes. All right, so going deeper within our funnel, we had channels. Everything on channel 4 is the HX Stomp. Program changes, all the controls, all the presets in the HX Stomp. And now all the different parameters within that preset are controlled by controller changes. Now here you're going to have to look at your manual to see what pre-programmed MIDI commands the HX Stomp receives. So when you open up the manual and scroll down to MIDI, it says that if the HX Stomp receives a controller change message on controller change 49, it'll act like you stepped on this button. If it gets a control change 50, it'll act like you stepped on this button. If it gets CC 51, it acts like you stepped on this button. So again, on OnSong, I have this set up already to send CC 49, 50, and 51. So when I tap this, it's going to act like I stepped on button 1. And watch that light light up. There it is. CC 50, the second light. CC 51, the next light. Make sense? So again, I'm having, just in the same way that we did the program changes, I programmed when I touch this sticky note, it sends control change 49 to change this button. CC 50 changes this button. CC 51 changes this button. So again, you're going to have to look through your manual to see, okay, I want to change this button in my MIDI device. I want this to turn on. I want this to turn off. I want my reverb to turn on, turn off. You're going to have to see what CC command you need in order to change the parameters within your device. Okay, so now within each device, you should be able to program anything, or it depends, all the gear is different, but for most things, you should be able to assign MIDI commands within your devices. So on your computer or on your MIDI device. So I'm going to show you how you do that in here. So what I'm going to do, this plate reverb, I want to turn that on and off with the MIDI commands. So I'm going to, and this is how you do it on the HX Stomp. You push both these buttons to go to the global menu. I'm going to go to bypass assign. So do I want to turn it on and off? What switch do I want? MIDI's not in here. you scroll over MIDI in. I'm going to set it to CC, let's say 85. So now, when this gets a message of CC 85, it is going to turn on and off the plate reverb. So CC 85 is going to turn on and off that reverb. So I'm going to program a new sticky note. New sticky note. Assign the action. Scroll down. MIDI event. I want to send a MIDI event. I'm going to add a new one. Control change. Only on channel 4. Controller 85. Now watch what happens to that orange block up there once I send that command. Uh-oh. What's happening? It's not working. So am I just an idiot? Am I doing something wrong? Here's something else that happens. Remember how I mentioned in a program change, you have a value of 0 to 127? Well, check this out. In here, in OnSong, we have the value at 127. Sending that test command is actually just turning it on. It's not turning it off. So now if I set the value to 0, test command, bam, turned it off. Put it back up to 127, turn it back on. Makes sense? So you have to send a MIDI command of 0 to turn it off and 127 to turn it on. Makes sense? Now watch this. If you turn it on latching, there's a difference between latching and momentary. Now watch this. When I turn latching on, test command, test command. Latching, it switches between 0 and 127. Does that make sense? So now when I tap it, it sent a 0 message. Tap it again, it sends a 127 message. Turn that off, it's only going to send 127, and therefore it will only turn that one on. Does that make sense? Something else that's really cool about this is that, so if I have this set to just off on the CC, if I do learn, it's going to listen for a MIDI command. So I'm going to send the MIDI command, and it was like, oh, you want MIDI CC 85 to control this parameter. And now I can turn it on and off by tapping this button. Make sense? So if you remember at the beginning of the video, I programmed this button to send all these nerdy smiley faces on the screen. So what I'm going to do actually is, and again in OnSong, so this is just another, don't just skip out of the video right now because I want you to do another one. The way that you get better at MIDI programming is by doing it just over and over again. So the way you assign foot controllers here is by pushing this button up here. It's saying MIDI triggers, listening for MIDI input on all channels. So I'm going to assign this first one. And it found control change 20 on channel 6. So I'm going to tap that. What do I want that to do? In this case, I want to start the backing track and I want it to play. So now I'm going to assign this one. It found control change 21. That's what this is programmed to do. I'm going to tap on that. I want that to stop the backing track. So this one, so in OnSong, you set your backing track here and you can choose the track that you want. I chose one of mine so that I don't get copyright. But now when I push this button, it should play, right? It did. Push this button again, it'll stop. Oh, it didn't stop. What's going on? I had to push it twice. Why is that happening? Shouldn't I push play? It should work? It didn't work. I have to push it twice. What's going on in here? So loading the AIRTURN app, and this is how you edit this device. I'm going to go in here. I'm not going to explain all of this. This is set to latch right now. So watch what happens when I set it to momentary on button 1. I'm going to set it to momentary. Latch is like turn it on and leave it on and then step on it again to turn it off. I want momentary in this case because I just want you step on it and it sends the command. So I'm going to save that. Go back to OnSong. Now watch what happens. Push it once and it plays. I still have to step on this one twice to stop it because it's still on latch. But now when I touch it once, it'll play. Make sense? Again, this has got fairly complicated, but I'm trying to give you a basic understanding of how MIDI programming works. And just plan on having a lot of headaches, because you're going to be like, just like little things like this. Why is program change 3 or program change 126 opening 125? Why do I have to step on this twice in order to make that work? Why does control change, like if I don't set the value to 127, why doesn't it turn on and off? So there's a lot of headaches with that. A lot of devices are fully functional, especially what you saw how we had that. So the video is getting too long, so I'm going to wrap up with this, and you should understand it, hopefully. Controller assign, I want the feedback to be controlled by MIDI CC 84. So when I send MIDI CC 84, the feedback parameter, so let me actually go ahead and just MIDI command 84. When I send a value of 127, it's going to load that feedback all the way up. If I set the value to 15, it's going to load it down. 0 turns it off. 127 turns it up to 100%. So on and so forth. Does that make sense? So you can still control the parameters in here based on the CC value. So I hope that made sense. Again, this video got really long. Let me know if this video helped you out by giving a thumbs up. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, I'm assuming that it helped you out at least a little bit. So if you can give a thumbs up, if you can like the video, that does help push the video out to other people, and therefore we'll get more views on it, which helps out my channel. So I would really appreciate that if you're able to do that. I do have links down below on where you can buy some of this stuff that I used for MIDI, as well as where to buy cables and stuff like that. Those are Amazon affiliate links, so that does help out my channel as well at no extra cost to you. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let me know what you guys are going to be programming using MIDI. If you're really stuck on your MIDI programming, you can hire me to do consulting. That is something I started offering on my website. Links are in the description down below. But I've helped multiple people set up their MIDI devices. I know that MIDI can be confusing, and it's actually been really fascinating to see how everyone has their different MIDI devices set up. So leave a comment down below. Let me know how you are using your MIDI devices and how you're using your MIDI programming, or what you plan to do with it. Thank you guys again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.